Hi everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'm going to be working on my Bloodwood tree, repotting it into bonsai soil and a bonsai pot. This Bloodwood tree is a gift from Scott Winnard of Let's Do Bonsai. We went to the US National Bonsai Show together this year, and we visited Tropical Expressions in Hamilton, Ontario, and I fell in love with this tree and he bought it for me as a gift. I'm going to plant the tree in this nice pot that Sophie made. It's made from gray clay. It's a rough kind of gray clay. And it's a good size for the tree. And I want to get the tree in some nice bonsai soil. I noticed in the plant room that some of the leaves were turning yellow. And I thought, well, it's probably just that transition from outdoor light here in the greenhouse to the indoor light in the plant room. And then when I picked the tree up, it felt really, really light, even though the surface of the soil is moist and wet. And I thought, oh, maybe, the water isn't draining through the pot and out the drainage holes. Maybe it's just sitting on the surface and the roots underneath are getting too dry. So that's one of the reasons I want to repot it today, to get it into free draining bonsai soil. So I know when I water it, that it'll be thoroughly watered throughout the whole soil level. These Bloodwood trees are a true tropical, so I would recommend keeping them warm and humid. I wouldn't let them go below 15 degrees Celsius. All right, my first step, I'm going to get the tree out of the pot. So here I go. It's coming out quite easily. Now let me just check the soil. So yeah, it's a good soil. Lots of pine bark, sort of some potting soil in there, fertilizer, but it is very dry below. So this, it's not a free draining soil. It's definitely dry in the bottom. So these trees do root easily from cuttings, so I'm not too worried about taking a lot of roots off. So I'll begin by raking out the root system, removing all this old soil. All right, here I go, raking away. And I'll try and not damage the roots. I'm being very careful here. Now I'm not sure if this is a Bloodwood tree or something else. It just popped up in the soil there. I will try and save it in case it's something exotic. You never know. Yeah, the soil is really dry under here. That's one thing about bonsai soil. If it's dry on top, it's usually dry down below. It tends to dry out more evenly than potting soil. So I really like the shape of this tree. I think it's just beautiful. And these in nature do grow into very large trees. And they're called a Bloodwood tree because when you cut them, the sap is bright red and then it turns black as it oxidizes, just like blood. And I think the wood is a nice dark red color too. So with my plant room being warm, humid, and very tropical, I found that some trees grow actually better in the plant room than they do outside here in the summer. Because we get hot spells, but they usually only last, a week or two at the most. And then the rest of the summer is fairly cool. Not always, but generally, like this summer we had a very hot June, and then once July and August came, it was rainy and cool and very, very pleasant, but not tropical. So all my ficus in that didn't do real well outside because it was just cool at night every night. And tropical trees like that 20 to 30 degree range, ideally with high humidity. And we just don't get that outdoors all the time. So the roots are quite tough and wiry on this tree, which is good because they don't get damaged when you're raking it out. They're tough. They kind of remind me of thuja roots, eastern white cedars. They're kind of tough and wiry. So I would say most of this soil is pine bark. It would be really, good to mix this soil in with some regular bonsai soil for coniferous trees. It would be a good soil additive. So you can see on the tree already that I've got multi-layers of root systems. The trunk extends down into the soil. So, I may have to either prune away these top roots and use roots from down below, or keep these as my radial surface roots and prune off the roots down at the bottom. So, I'll have to make that decision once I get it bare rooted, washed, and have a good look at the root system and decide what approach to take. What you don't want is these multi-layers of root systems, because you want to develop the radial roots. You want those to feed the tree, and that gives you a nice root flare at the base of the tree, and it allows you to get it into a fairly shallow pot eventually. So at this point, this pot I'm putting it in is more of a, an oversized pot to get the tree healthy and growing. Yeah, these are definitely tough, wiry roots. There's been very few roots that I've torn through. Most of the roots are still intact, and I'm able to comb them out successfully. And the roots aren't too tangled. Like some trees, the roots grow in knots and they grow back in on themselves and they're just a mess. This one is fairly well organized. The roots seem to grow out radially from the trunk. So you can see this was started as a cutting. There's where it was cut off here. So it's not too bad a root system, probably because it was grown from a cutting. If it was grown from a seed, then you might get a little more tangling. So I pretty well have it bare rooted now. And I think the next step is to wash the root system. Normally I would wash the roots in rainwater, but the rainwater is too cold, so I went inside and I got some nice warm tap water. So in goes the tree, like that, and I'll swish it around. Like that, washing the root system clean. So now I can clearly see the root system on the tree, and I can go and prune it up. Okay, it's time to look at the roots and prune them up. So right away, I notice that the trunk extends down and then my major roots are down at this level. So I think these top roots can be pruned off, and I will. So here I go. Take those roots away. This one here, these ones, and all these ones on the side here have to come off. Keeping my better trunk flare down below. Because trunk flare is what makes a tree look mature. It's having that nice trunk flare from the root system. So now you can see I've got it down close to the level of the major roots where they flare out from the trunk.
So next I've got to look and see what I have. I have a crossing root here I can prune away. I've got a root here that comes from over this side, and these roots are really stiff. They're not flexible at all. So that root will have to be cut away where it comes out of the trunk. And I've just got to see where it comes from. I'll cut it here for now and then maybe clean it up later. Very tough roots. There. So I'm pulling that one out. So that's one major root defect resolved. There's another root here. You can see it's sticking up out of the soil or out of the root plane. So again, that one needs to be removed. So that one comes off. Now you can start to see the flow of the root base. And this will require a bit of cleanup in the end. There's a couple here sticking up, going 90 degrees to the radial pattern. Don't want those. There's a root here. You can see it goes down quite deep, and it needs to be pruned. So this one is radial, this one is not. It goes a very funny direction, and I need to clean the soil out here to see what's going on. To see where that root comes from. It looks like it comes off this main root. Well, maybe not. You can see here there's a root that comes down and curls underneath. So that's where this root comes from, is over here. So that needs to be taken off, and it's a big cut. It'll take a lot of these fine feeder roots off, but again, these trees grow well from cuttings, and it's in a good environment. It's in the plant room. So I'm going to have to cut it off. So here I go. I will come in here and cut it off. Tough wood. Very tough wood. Wow, is it tough? It's like cutting through iron. I'm still not through it yet. Getting closer. So it's a big, big cut, but if this tree is going to have a good radial root system, this is a good step in the right direction. Now, how close am I to getting that out? Not very close. I've got to be careful I don't cut my hand. Getting in here. That may have gotten it. I was hoping not to have to take so much off the root system, but okay, just about through. There it goes. So there goes that whole lump on the bottom, and the root came and crossed underneath the tree and out. So yeah, a pretty significant cut. Basically, you know, removing the bottom of that root system. But you can see I'm still left with quite a nice radial root system. So the next big root is this one, which is way too thick compared to all the other radial roots, so it has to get cut off. Not cut off, but reduced. So here I go. And I think somewhere about here is good. So here I go. Like that. So here's what I'm left with. You know, not a whole lot. There is another crossing root here that has to be removed. Like that. You can see it snaked around. It wasn't very radial or flowing. And that is it for the root pruning. Severe reduction, but it's got the beginnings of a good root system. So next, it's time to plant the tree.
I'm going to pick the front of the tree now. I think, you know, as far as the root base, this is a good front, the best front for the root base. For the actual tree, I would say here is the best front. So the two don't quite align, but they're close. I think I want my thickest trunk in the front, where it divides to that back trunk. That'll be in the behind, and this will be out to the side, and this to the side. So yeah, so this is a really good front of the tree right about here, and the root base is quite nice from that view also. So yeah, it's pretty close. You know, the ideal front of the root base would be here, but the front of the tree is here. So I'll pick the front of the tree for structure, and we'll try and keep working on that root base to get it looking really nice. I've got my drainage screen in the bottom of the pot, so I'll fill it up with a base layer of soil. And I'll have to plant the tree fairly deep to make sure that root system is covered up, and it'll provide a bit of stability for the tree. I'll have to brace the tree with rocks around it until the roots, you know, get established in the pot. The tree is going to get planted about here, and because it has the strong branches to the right hand side, I'll offset the tree to the left hand side of the pot a bit. Not too much, but just a slight bit. So before I fill it in with soil, I'm going to make sure my roots are raked out so they're nice and radial. What roots are left anyway? Okay, so that's looking good. And now I can start adding my soil. And as I'm adding the soil, I'm lifting the tree up so the roots aren't horizontal, so they taper down into the soil. Okay, so the tree is staying upright by itself, but I'll make sure I have something holding it in place. I don't want it to tip over. So next I want to stand back and have a look at the composition. Make sure everything's looking good. Here is a look at the tree in the pot. I think it's just a little bit crooked. When I place rocks around it, I'll make sure it's nice and vertical. So I think that is looking good. I'm very happy with the slight offset in the pot. I'm happy with the front of the tree. Yes, I think that will do quite nicely. So next, I'll give my tree a water with the warm water. And once it goes in the plant room, I'll flush it out with nice rainwater.
I just don't want those roots getting cold.
My last step for today is to place some rocks around the base of the tree to hold it in position until those roots grow and fill the pot.
I've got some fairly large stones. I warmed them up in the bucket of the water because they were outside and they were quite cold. So this one's nice and vertical, so it should hold the trunk in place. So I can put it right beside the trunk, like that. The next one, I will put somewhere, maybe here. That can hold the trunk in that direction. And these stones are just temporary. They'll come off once that root system grows. I think this one's a little large. I'm going to find a smaller stone. There, I think this is a better size, so I can put it right in there against the trunk. So that'll really hold that trunk in there nicely.
Here is a look at the tree from the front view. So I'll rotate it around so you can see it from all angles. So here's the front, coming around to the right-hand side, coming around to the back of the tree, around to the left-hand side, and back to the front. The next few weeks will be critical for this tree. I'll have to keep it warm, humid, in bright but not too intense light. So in the plant room under the grow lights, it should do quite well. As I said, these grow quite easily from cuttings, and this is basically, a large cutting with a meager root system. So hopefully all will go well. It's time now for today's updates. My first update for today is my Sabina juniper. I've just been letting it grow. I want to let all these tufts get thick, and then I'll prune them back. All the vertical parts will come off and the side shoots will be allowed to grow. So I've got to wait for the tree to get stronger before I do that. If I were to prune all these vertical tips off now, it wouldn't leave much foliage on the tree. It would be weak and it may or may not recover. So it's in a growth phase now. When it gets really bushy and all these lower kind of spindly branches start to thicken up and grow with vigor, then it'll get kind of hard pruned back once again. I'm worried about this moss growing on the pot. After my last tree, where the moss was stopping the water getting into the soil, I think I'd better strip the moss off this to make sure it's getting watered properly. The last tree I had that thick covering of moss was my fire and ice hibiscus, and even though I watered it thoroughly, when I went to repot it, the soil was very dry underneath. And this moss is very bushy and long, so I'm going to strip it off totally, exposing the bonsai soil, and then I can be sure that it's getting properly watered. Now, is the soil dry? It's not too bad. It was getting watered quite well, actually, which is good. Okay, so next I'm going to strip the moss away from the trunk. I'm stripping away the moss from the trunk because the moss holds moisture and it'll actually soften the bark up, and instead of getting a nice bark on your tree, it'll kind of rot away. It won't kill the tree, but it'll ruin the bark. So you'll have one kind of bark on the top of the tree and a different kind of bark down below, because it's not getting sunshine and it's getting all that moisture around it. So I'm going to take all the moss away from the trunk of the tree. Because of the rain, it's getting quite dark out, so I turned on the light that Tom sent me from Grow and Clip Bonsai for Seniors, and it lights up my workspace really nicely so I can continue working on the tree in good light. So thanks very much, Tom. So nice having that light.
Here is a look at the tree now. I've got the moss removed from the base, so I'll just rotate it around. So next I'll give it a good thorough watering. All right, here I go with the water. That's draining really well, which means the tree isn't root bound yet. Okay, that will do. My Sabina juniper is all cleaned up, watered. It can go back on the bench. The next update for today is the fall colors, which means I'll have to venture outside in the rain. I can hear thunder outside. It's unusual to get thunderstorms in November. So here's a look at my Norway maple. It's in the very final stages of the fall colors. Some of the leaves have already fallen off. Beside that, I have my larch forest. So you can see there's various stages of the fall colors. The tree over here is, all the needles are straw colored and they're starting to fall off. This tree is totally yellow. This tree has still got some green on it, and so does the one back here. So a nice variety of fall colors on the larches. In the greenhouse here, my field maple is still looking good in its fall colors. It's just beautiful. I'd better get my Bloodwood tree into the warm plant room now, get it warmed up and hopefully growing. That's all for today. I'm Nigel Saunders. Thanks for joining me in the Bonsai Zone.